All right, so we're going to start a new skills unit today. We're going to have some fun with making some Christmas ornaments. So if you go to my agenda here on trimester 2, week 1, we're on Tuesday, December 5th. Create a Christmas ornament in Photoshop. We're going to break up some of these pieces in short segments. So I'm going to click and open that browser, and here's our tutorial from Photoshop Star, how to create Christmas ornaments in Photoshop. It's going to use some basic tools and techniques that I think are helpful for you. Here's our final image. Well, we should or hopefully end up with something close to. And scrolling down here, you'll see that we have some resources, links to resources. And up here in the top, you'll notice that this photo or this tutorial was made using CS3. We are currently in a much newer version, so some of the instructions here may not match up with what I'm going to do in our tutorial. So just an FYI, there's always another way to do something in Photoshop, as I found. So we're going to start off with creating a new document that is 2000 pixels by 1500 pixels, and you'll notice in our little picture here that it's also 240 resolution. So we're going to make sure we match all of that. So I'm going to tab over to Photoshop and create a new document. And you'll notice I have 2000 pixels there, 1500 and 240 resolution already ready to go. And I'm going to hit create. And the next step in our tutorial is to add this blue to white gradient in the background. So I'm going to tab over here and select my gradient tool on the left hand side. If you don't see the gradient tool, click down on it, and if it's underneath paint bucket, you just select gradient tool. Next, I need to select my colors for this gradient. So up here in the options bar, I'm going to click on this little gradient image, and I've already selected the colors for this, but I'll take you through this here just real quick. Down here in the bottom where you have the color stop, click on that and click on the color box down here. And if we go back to our tutorial, just copy and paste that color number right there, the hexadecimal color number, by selecting or typing Command C or Control C. And then I'm going to pop over to Photoshop again and then paste that into that color number box down there. Click OK. My other stop down here is just simply white. So if I click on my color box, just click and drag that all the way to the corner there, so you should see FFFF all the way in the color box. And click OK, click OK. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to actually place my cursor just outside our document, and I'm not going to click and drag it all the way. Notice that I'm doing it as a diagonal, and I'm only going to go about maybe halfway into my document. The reason for that is because I want more blue here and less white. If I were to click and drag this all the way across the document, what it would do is give me more of a uniform look and all the way across. But I would like to have this more blue than white. Okay, so I'm going to tab back over to our instructions here, and it asks us to put in a guideline around 1000 pixels. And I'm going to scroll down and kind of show you the next piece here, because I'm going to do two at once, and we're going to draw this red circle and place it somewhat in the middle of our document. So I'm going to tab back over to Photoshop, and you'll notice that in our guides, and if you don't see the guides, just go to View, Rulers, and you'll see your guide, you'll see the ruler show up. My ruler is set to inches instead of pixels, so really I'm just going to take a guess as to where the center is here. If I just click and drag from the left hand side, it'll give me my guide, and it should snap approximately somewhere in the middle. And so the 2000 pixels wide is somewhere around 8.33 inches wide. So I'm going to keep it there at 4.167. That should be about half. And then my next step is to select my marquee tool and create that circle. A couple different ways we could do this. We could do this as just as a shape. The instructions tell you to use a marquee tool, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So before I select my marquee tool on my layers panel over here, I'm going to click a new layer. That's going to be the ball layer there. And I'm going to click on my marquee tool. And as I click and drag this marquee tool, I'm going to push down on the shift key on my keyboard. So then as I draw it out, it makes a nice, perfectly round circle. I can move this in a minute, but I next need to fill this with that red color that it gives us. So a couple different ways to do this. Right down here you'll notice that I actually have that red color already in my foreground palette. If I click on this, you can copy and paste that number, which is 890000, and just put that right in there. And the shortcut key to do this would be to use the Alt Delete key, and that'll automatically fill it that way. Or you can go up to Edit, Fill, and select from your menu Color, and you can use the dropper tool that way, or use and then type in the number that way as well. Okay, so a couple of different ways to do that. I need to deselect this my marching ants marquee here, so I'm going to hit Command D and select my move tool, and then I want to place this right in the middle of my marker there. Okay, next we have we need to make, come back to my instructions here, we need to make this shape right here using the pen tool to create the top of the ball. And so we're gonna kind of scroll down here and show you at the end here. We'll end up making that, and it'll end up getting put together in the ball. Okay, so I'm going to tab over. I'm going to create a new layer to do this, and I'm going to select my pen tool. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a little bit and scroll down, and I can resize this later on if I need to, but I'm going to try to make this the proper size, and I'm going to use this guideline as kind of my middle point here. So I'm going to start with a point right about, I'm just going to do it above, so right about there, and then I'm going to hit the shift key, so that way when I put my next point in, it's going to make a straight line versus being, not perfectly straight. And then I'm going to come up to this line here and put in my next point, and using the shift key again, and this time I'm going to do it a little bit short here, so I'm going to put it somewhere right about in there, and then I need to connect those two with that curve, and I'm going to zoom in here using Control or Command plus, use my space bar to move around, and zoom in just a little bit more, too much. There we go. So I'm going to use Control minus to zoom back out there. Now I'm going to take my pen tool, and I'm not going to complete this just yet. I'm going to get close. So I don't want to get the complete circle there. So I'm just going to get real close, click my next point there, and then in the middle of that point I'm going to add another point, and this time it's going to give me a curve handle. So to make this bend, I need to use the Command or Windows key and hold that down while I click and drag this point to create the bend in our shape. Okay? Then last but not least, before I'm finished, I need to complete this by selecting that circle there. Okay? By completing the loop. Now that I've got my initial shape, I need to right click inside of this and create Make Selection. And it's going to be all this stuff, new selection, anti-aliased, all that jazz, and click OK. So now I'm going to have this marching ant looking shape. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the ball. We're going to fill this thing. So right now you notice that I have my blue color in there. I'm not sure how that happened, but I'm going to select foreground color, pick that red again, so it should be 89000, click OK, and then Alt Delete will fill that, and then hit Command D. Okay, so if you click here, notice on my layer 3 there that I have that shape, and next I can select my move tool, and the next thing that I need to do, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out real quick, so Command minus, Control minus. Okay, next thing I need to do is to duplicate this layer. So to do that, I'm going to, with my move tool, select the Alt key. Notice that my arrow changes when I select the Alt key. I'm going to click and drag this out. And I'm just going to drag it to that marker that I made, that guide. And then I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. So now I have that topper there, and I'm going to select, next I'm going to select layer 3. So on my layers panel, I'm going to select both layer 3 copy and layer 3. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to merge those. So I'm going to right click and merge those layers. And then I'm going to bring this down to my ball and fit it nicely on top there. So you can kind of see how that's looking in the nice topper piece. Okay, before I go any further, I want to make sure I start naming these layers. So I'm going to double click carefully in the name of that layer and just call this ball topper. And then on layer 2 there, I'm just going to call this ball. Alright, so before I keep going here and make sure that I'm being smart about everything, I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go File, Save As, and we're going to call this Xmas or Christmas Ornament. And I'm just going to save this on my desktop. You guys need to save this in your U drive. So I'm going to click Save. Just so I don't lose anything on accident, I'm going to tab over to my instructions here and make sure that I'm good there. Okay, and keep scrolling down. It says group the, so I've already done this, group the 2 neck layers to the ball, name the group ball, back up, duplicate this group, turn off the visibility of the original group, and right click the duplicate layer from the drop down menu, choose merge group. Okay, so I think what we're doing here is we're just making sure that group the 2 neck layers, palette, move the group over the ball shown, group the 2 neck layers and the ball layer together. Okay, so essentially we're going to just put these 2 things together, and I think for later on, just in case something happens. So I'm going to select those 2 layers there, and to group, it's not an option in your menu, but you want to hit Control G or Command G. So Command G there, and it's going to create a group. And you'll see that those things go in there, and it also tells us to duplicate these. So I'm going to right click on that and duplicate that group, and it said to make it, and we're going to call this Ornament Group BU for backup. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and rename this group layer as well as just Ornament. Okay, alright, let's come back to our instructions now. Now it says create a new layer and clip it to the ball layer. Alt click between the 2 layers. This means that all pixels on the upper layer will be visible only through the pixels of the lower layer, or anything that we draw on the upper layer won't get out of the boundaries of the lower layer. Name this layer highlight. Okay? Alright, so let's see. So we need to create a new layer and then make it a clipping mask essentially. Okay, so I'm going to tab over to our piece here. I'm going to undo the eyeball for the backup layer. I'm going to add a new layer above this one. I'm going to rename this one highlight before I add that clipping mask. And then right down here in my effects, down here in my layers piece, you'll see a little kind of like a camera looking button. Click that. And actually, Control Z, we don't want to do that. We're going to go ahead and right click and create clipping mask. Do it that way. Okay, so we're going to apply that clipping mask to highlight and tab over to our instructions here, and it says select the brush tool and choose the standard round soft brush. Choose a white color and lower the opacity of the brush to 50-60%. Set the size of the brush to 400 pixels. Click once in the upper right corner of the ball ornament to create a highlight as shown. Alrighty, so tab over, select our brush tool over here on the right hand side. We want a standard soft brush, and we want it to be, let's see, I forgot those settings, 400 pixels, brush opacity of 50-60%. Okay, so in my, change this value up here to 400, and we're going to leave it at 44%. I don't know if that's standard or not, but we're going to go with it. And where it says opacity up here, it says we're going to need to lower this to like 50 or 60%. Let's see, double check that value. Yeah, let's just go ahead and do something right in the middle at 55. The foreground color of this needs to be, click once, let's see, choose a white color. Okay, so you'll notice down here in my foreground background color, see this little tiny arrow down here? If I click on that arrow, it'll flip it. So right now my white is set as a foreground color and my red is set as a background color. This is important because when I want to use my brush, I want the foreground color to be white. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out real quick, and you'll kind of notice that this ends up being right about in that area, that quadrant area of the ball. So I'm going to tab over and just click it once, boom. I feel like that's not quite what we're after here, so I think we probably need to pick a softer brush. So I'm going to Control Z that and lower the hardness down to, let's just try something at like 50%. Well, let's see what this one is. That's 0%. Is that what we're after? There we go. That's what we're after. 0% on the hardness there. So it's a very, very soft brush. No very soft edges. Okay. So just to recapture that hardness there, set that to 0 pixels and then 400 pixels. Okay, tab over to our instructions here, and I think we'll do perhaps maybe one more step and then we'll call it good for today's tutorial. It says create a new layer and name it darkness. Clip it to the highlight layer. This will have the effect of clipping it to the ball layer. With the same soft brush but a black color and a lower opacity, 10%, paint loosely some dark shading on the indicated sections of the ornament. So we're just creating shadow on the bottom here, which will highlight this, this glow on the front of the ball. So I'm going to tab over to Photoshop. We're going to add a new layer above this. We're going to go ahead and name it darkness. And we're also going to, there's a little news update there for you. I'm going to add that clipping mask, so right click, create clipping mask. So now that this darkness will only apply to this ornament piece. And we're going to take our ball again. Over here in our foreground color for this, we don't need white, we need black. Right next to that little arrow that I just showed you a minute ago, you'll see a little tiny black and white box there as well, and this will reset your foreground color to black and white. So I'm just going to click that so I don't have to go and choose a color picker, and I'm just going to take this darkness piece and I'm just going to paint it. I think that's a little too much. I'm going to go ahead and Control Z. It said it wanted us to change it down to 10%, so we'll see that. I'm gonna paint on the edges here using my brush instead of using the full piece of my brush. Let's kind of get right in there. I think that's pretty good. I can live with that. And so now I'm going to tab back over and let's see where we're at in terms of our instructions. It says create a new layer and clip it to the layers below with a dark brush at 30% opacity. Draw some dark shading on the upper part of the ornament ball as indicated below. So it looks like to me that we need to adjust the brush size on this somewhat. And then it says create another new layer and clip it again to the layers below. Layer the size of the soft brush to 10 pixels and with a white color, draw a subtle highlight as indicated below right above that dark layer. Okay, so let's do these two things and we'll call it good. Tab back over since we're kind of in the same vein. Going to zoom in and move that around. I'm going to change the size of my brush to something that is a little bit easier to work with in this sense. Probably not that small, maybe something around 20 pixels. We'll go with that. And what did it say in terms of the weight? So 30% opacity. And change that hardness down to 0 again. And with the brush tool, you can also use the shift key to draw in a straight line. So no matter what, it's going to be a straight line for me. So I'm just going to push. You know what I did? I didn't create a new layer. I'm going to go ahead and back that off. So above darkness there on the ball ornament, create a new layer. Double check that that's right. Create a new layer and clip it to the layers below. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing. Darkness, neck. Name that so I know what it is for later on. Right click, create clipping mask. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead, oops. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw in my shadow. Just kind of did a couple of once over. Maybe get that right in there in the corner so it doesn't look like it's. There we go. Maybe kind of play. I don't know if that's too dark. Let's go ahead and lower the opacity just a little bit. Maybe work in some of those bottom areas so it doesn't look so fake. Okay. Then next we got to do the same thing only with white. Let's double check our settings here. Scroll down below, it says create a new layer, clip it again, lower the size of the brush to 10 pixels with a white color, draw a subtle highlight as indicated below. Okay, so new layer, highlight neck, and right click, create clipping mask. This time I'm going to come over to my brush color and change that to white just by clicking that little arrow. It says to change the size to 10. Oops, not 120. 10. And let's check the. Didn't say anything about the opacity, but I think the previous opacity in that layer was right around 30%. So I'm going to drag that to 30. And so right above that, I'm just going to kind of overlap just slightly using my shift key once again and drawing that light line all the way across. Oops. I might want to go a little bit lower than that so I don't have that line. So I'm going to Control Z on that bad boy. Go just slightly lower so the two tend to blend in. I can go off of the ornament just a little bit because it's only applying to that ornament using that clipping mask. That's why they recommend, or that's why they had us use a clipping mask. So I can go all the way off and it won't draw on the background layer because that clipping mask is only applying it to that grouped layer called ornament down below. Okay, so if I hit Command 1, that's going to give me my what my ornament's starting to shape up like currently on my piece. We're getting there, not close, it's close. I probably should have used maybe that softer brush on the neck highlight there. I can go back and fix that. If I'd like, to make it a little bit softer, I probably should have used maybe a slightly bigger brush, but I think I'll keep it where it's at right now. I'm okay with it. You'll notice down here it says we're going to add some noise to this in the next step, but I'm going to end it right there so I can keep the tutorial short and manageable for our skills unit. We'll pick up tomorrow at around step 16.